You got a 36, 37-year-old LeBron James, who you're clearly not going to anticipate playing 82 games in a regular season for obvious reasons. You have an Anthony Davis, who's an all-NBA caliber top 10 player, who you're not going to anticipate him playing all 82 games. So that's why you initially bring in Russ. Because despite his age, he's going to be 100 miles and running. And he's going to be giving them some supersized triple-doubles this year. Don't be surprised if he even second in rebounding on their team. And so now you need shooting to go alongside those playmakers, right? And if you notice, each of the guys that they brought in are really good three-point shooters. Carmelo improved his three-point shot as he's progressed in the league. Malik Monk is a young athlete that's going to give you spring and shoot 40. Kendrick Nunn, the same thing he did in Miami. Bazemore and Ellington as well. So you surround those guys, those playmakers with shooting. Now the key though is seeding for the Lakers. Let me make sure I say this. You're going to hear the words load management a lot with their team. They got an old squad. You don't get younger by adding Carmelo Anthony, which means they're not going to be a number 1 or 2 seed in the West. So that don't mean they can't win the championship. I still feel like they're the favorite in the West. But what happens is it just lessens your margin of error. You know, somebody has an issue with COVID, someone has an injury, anything can happen, and now all of a sudden you're playing against the Golden State Warriors in the first round or something like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate the regular season. But in a 7-game series, if and when they're healthy, favorites to come out of the West.
Ever since LeBron left Miami, you and I have said the same thing. They need to surround him with 3 and D players, and they do have a lot of the 3, but not a lot of those players have the D. Like when you look at that list of 3-point shooters that they have, Malik Monk has never been called a defensive stopper. Kendrick Nunn is not a defensive stopper. Bazemore is not defensive. Anthony Ellington, none of these players have a defensive reputation. Can they score enough to get themselves out of the West?
While it's a volume 3-point shooting league, the emphasis is still on offensive players, Jacoby. But when you watch how the Bucks won the championship, it wasn't because they were standing around launching threes. It's still a tall, big man's game. And the key to this is going to be Anthony Davis. And here's the elephant in the room. You can put all of the rosters up there. You can put all of the percentages up there. The Lakers going to need AD to play the 5. That's what they're going to need to do. You can bring in Andre Drummond. You can bring in Dwight Howard. You can bring in Marc Gasol. You can bring in Montrezl Harrell. The elephant in the room is AD got to be willing to play the 5.
Will work either. Mr. Rose, what do you think about this duo and LeBron James once again firing back at the haters?
So we gonna make the Lakers the underdogs this year? Is that what we trying to do?
That's what LeBron's trying to do.
I just want to know. Okay, because they're betting odds that the Los Angeles Lakers are going to win the West, right?
Yep.
Ain't those the betting odds?
Pretty clear
So that
favorites,
means they're an actual favorite, right? That means they're a favorite, right? I just wanted to make sure I said that out loud. They're a favorite. They're not an underdog. As a matter of fact, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Hall of Famers that are going to be playing for their team this year. I am not worried about their fit. And the other thing I got to teach everybody about my guy, Brody Russ. Let me teach y'all something. As somebody that grew up idolizing the Big O, I thought no one, if Magic didn't do it, if Jason Kidd didn't do it, if LeBron didn't do it, would ever eclipse his triple-double record. Now he just gets them at halftime. So this idea that he's not going to fit in, newsflash, when you average a triple-double, you fit in anywhere. It's basketball. They'll be just fine.
They'll be fine. They'll be fine. Another thing is, There are people that think this isn't a good fit. There are people that think that this will not work. But those people are wrong. It's Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. Maybe they don't fit together on the court at the same time, but that's why they brought Dennis Schroeder in to be a second playmaker with the second unit. Would you rather have Dennis Schroeder on your team or Russell Westbrook, triple-double machine, future Hall of Famer on your team? There's a reason Dennis Schroeder got $5.9 million from the Celtics and a one-year deal. Russell Westbrook is a much more valuable player. Their roster from top to bottom is much better than last year. So, yes, people did say they were old. People did say that it won't work. Those people are wrong, LeBron. You are the favorites to win the West, and clearly the favorites. Clearly the favorites. But you know what? Whatever you got to do to motivate yourself. You're in like year 20 of your career. Whatever you got to do to motivate yourself. Remember this tweet? When he was like, he's just, whatever he has to do to motivate himself, whatever your process is, LeBron, enjoy it, because I once again see you being an MVP candidate and number one in the West. Go ahead.
There's an animal that the NBA has not been introduced to yet. That's Russell Westbrook playing in purple and gold in front of his family and friends. Y'all thought that gentleman played with intensity and ferocity before. Oh man, it's about to be on a whole different level. And when you talk about it working, it ain't necessarily about like they're a perfect match made in heaven basketball-wise. There are gonna be some kinks there, of course, but the bottom line is they're going to be a terrific team, and Russell Westbrook is going to have a really good season.
And they also have Anthony Davis. Just throwing that out there. They also have a healthy Anthony GOAT, LeBron James. However, my man Tim on Temps had a survey of scouts, and they said that Giannis is the best player in the league, that KD is the best player in the league, and no one said LeBron James is the best player in the league. So he said, thank you, as if I didn't need more to fuel me. Washed King. Jalen Rose, LeBron James is really playing up the no one believes in us card this year. What do you think about his response to being not called the best player in the league?
LeBron James is the superstar who not only has become a Hall of Fame all-time great player, but he did it in the social media era. And the one thing he understands how to do is own and craft his own motivation and his own narrative. And that's what he's doing right here. Just because 10 people say that he's not the best player in the league, that doesn't mean that he's washed. That just means that we're playing king of the court. And you know how this works. Giannis is the valedictorian this offseason, everybody. KD is the salutatorian. As we saw one of those guys be dominant and win finals MVP, we saw the second guy average 20 in the Olympics and bring home the gold medal. That's just how the game works when you at the court, Jacoby. I don't have to tell you.
No. And yes, KD is on our minds because of Team USA and because of what he did with the Nets when everyone was injured. Giannis is on our minds because he won the championship. However, let me just remind everybody, LeBron James went to 35 straight finals. LeBron James won the championship in the bubble. LeBron James was the favorite to win MVP before Solomon Hill rolled over his ankle. LeBron James, in my mind, is not the most athletic, not the youngest, not the bounciest player, but he changes the outcome of the game. He affects the game more than anybody else, and in my mind is the best player in the NBA. But he will never tweet about that because he only likes it when people don't believe in him. And you look at the Lakers team. He tweeted many times about how the Lakers are old and how the fit's not going to work with Russ. Look at this team, Jalen. They've got so many people headed to Springfield on this team. They could field a starting 5 of Hall of Famers on this team alone. Russ, AD, Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James. They could put a Hall of Fame starting 5 out there if they wanted to. I believe in the Lakers. Vegas believes in the Lakers. Don't you believe they're favorites to at least come out of the West?
Yes, yes, and yes. But also in LeBron's 3 years there, the first year he dealt with some injuries. They didn't make the playoffs. The second year, as you mentioned, they won a championship in the bubble. And then the third year, they got bounced in the first round. So while we're talking about age, and by the way, there are other great players, i.e. Kevin Durant, who are actually older than Russell Westbrook, I think the more important topic would be health. because LeBron has missed some games, whether load management based on his age and or based on his injury history these last couple of years, not really throughout his career. And Anthony Davis has dealt with that his entire career. So that's going to be the key. Can they stay healthy? If they're healthy, they win the West.
If the Lakers are healthy, they win the West. And James Harden in the Eastern Conference with the Nets said if his team is healthy, he said, quote, at full strength, nobody can beat us. I'm just going to leave it at that. Jalen Rose, what do you think about his emphatic statement about his Brooklyn Nets team?
So you know who's not talking about next year? Giannis.
Nope.
He in Greece with the championship trophy, the finals MVP trophy. You know why? Because his team actually got it done this year. James Harden came up short. So did LeBron James. But here's the thing I want to say about James Harden. A fantastic player who's going to have a terrific year with the Nets. One of the most unique players that the league has seen. He has to perform better in closeout games. I'm looking deeper into the box score, sir. And in his last 6 closeout games, he's lost 5. Look at the field goal percentage. Look at the turnovers per game.
Turnovers.
The points per game are down. So now, why is that important to me? Because you go from being the guy with the Nets. You go from being the guy with the Rockets to a big 3 with the Nets. So now the pressure should be off of him, and he should be able to perform a lot better, at least a lot more efficient.
When we look at these two teams, the Lakers and the Nets, in my mind, they're clear favorites to come out of their conference, and Vegas backs that up too. When you look at the numbers, they got the Lakers coming out of the West, and then there's a big gap, and they have the absolute Warriors actually as the second in the West. And in the Eastern Conference, when you look at the numbers, again, the Nets are favored to come out at just plus 100. Then there's a big gap to plus 325 for the Bucks to come out of the East. So these are clear favorites, but you mentioned it. There's one word that comes up when you look at these two teams, health. And James said it himself. He said, at full strength, no one can beat us. And you look at the Lakers, at full strength, no one can beat them. Do you expect a lot of load management, a lot of long absences to give extra time to come back from injury to guarantee health for these two teams in the playoffs?
Great. I'm glad you went here. So each situation is going to handle it different. For the Lakers, you stagger LeBron and or AD to play with Russ or Russ to play with both of those guys out. With the Nets, it's going to be the exact same thing. If you want to rest KD or Kyrie, then that's going to be Harden, or it's going to be 2 of the 3. Each of those squads are going to find ways to keep an anchor out there. And you know who the anchor's got to be?